What's going on, everybody? All right, it's Wednesday. Wednesday is Q&A day. Last week, I got some really good questions, and I'm super excited to share my opinion on those questions. I actually had more questions than normal. So if you submitted a question and I don't use it this week, don't worry. It's on the list to use in upcoming weeks. And if you have a question that you want me to use on an upcoming episode, down below in the comments, all you have to do is simply type out your question. I will cut it, I will paste it into the list and get to it soon. I really like these Q&A episodes. Whenever I sit down and I look into my phone as I sit on my bed in my bedroom, in my luxurious studio that is my bedroom, I always really sit down and get extra excited for these Wednesday episodes. It's fun to talk cards. And it's fun to, there are times I make episodes and I make videos and I make different things and I say, I hope that people out there are interested in this. But the thing about the Q&A episodes is I know people are interested in it because you all are the ones that brought it up. And the whole point of the channel is to talk about things that we're all interested in. So, very excited for these upcoming 5 questions. Now, on Friday, I will be coming out with another episode that is going to be my pickups from the month of August. Now, first of all, I'm a bozo. I'm a bozo because what I did was, for whatever reason, I was thinking that my last day at the National was August 1st. So I didn't include a good look at my Cy Young card that I picked up at the National in my July video. So I'll show that again. I'll show that as one of my August pickups, even though technically it was the last day of July. But that was brain loss on my end. But I bought a couple of really pretty big cards that I'm really excited about. Some pre-war stuff. Are they all pre-war? No, they're not all pre-war. I have some from the Golden Era, have a couple of pre-war cards. I sold a couple of things. I had a little bit of extra money come in from a couple of side things I did at work. And what did I do? Did I sit on it? Did I wait around? No, because like a true card addict, I immediately spent the money. But I think it was worth it. So looking forward to showing you those on Friday, along with a topic that I haven't talked about in a while, but I think is worthy of speaking about again. And so I'm going to share some thoughts on, I'll show you on Friday. Here we are on Wednesday, midway through the week, short week, Labor Day Monday. Let's get to my questions. Enough of me just rambling. Let's go. First question here. His first question says, question for a future episode. Breaking news that Kevin O'Leary was one of the 3 buyers sharing the one-of-one exquisite Jordan Kobe that sold for nearly $13 million the other day. I listened to his interview, quoting investment market similar to art and watch market. I'm torn if this is a good or a bad thing. He clearly views cards as an investment. I'm worried that tech bros could follow suit and swoop into the hobby and snatch up grail pieces like exquisite cards, early mantles, T206 Cobbs, etc. And we might not be able to have an opportunity to buy them again unless we have lots of money. Could this be the start of getting priced out of our current attainable grails? Maybe some of the prices during COVID were a precursor to the potential price ceiling? All right, now I definitely understand your concern. I definitely understand your question. In fact, this question resonated with me so much that I made it my question for last Monday's episode, 2 days ago, on Labor Day. My question for the week was, is this big purchase, this, $12.9 million card? It was a dual logo man, dual autograph of Kobe and Michael Jordan. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the card industry, for the card community, for the card market? And I want to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to share my thoughts here, which is not something I usually do. Usually what I do is I share most of my thoughts in the Monday episode, where after I've gone over your thoughts, I kind of blend in my thoughts, and I'll still do that. But because the question really originated here, I wanted to address it here. This is also something that was a big topic on Saturday night's Sports Cards Live with Jeremy Lee. I put a link to that video in my Monday episode. I'll put a link to that video in this episode as well. I would encourage you to check that out. I think that Joe Perot, I think that Jeremy Lee had some really good thoughts. It kind of went throughout the whole episode, but it was really the first 45 minutes or so that it was a main topic. Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect also chimed in, had some great thoughts. I think all three of them had some great things to say. And so what I will do here is I will kind of talk about my thoughts on whether this is a good or a bad thing. So I think a lot of us have for a long, long time, I mean, because listen, most of us that are in the card community that are into vintage cards, like most viewers of this channel. Now, not everyone who views this channel is a vintage card collector, but an overwhelming majority are mostly into vintage cards. I think that a lot of us, for a long, long time, have wanted this hobby to be legitimized. Now, that's not to say that it's not legitimate. I think that we've always agreed that this was a legitimate hobby, and a lot of these cards, if you look at the track record over time, what has happened with the value of cards, especially premier vintage cards and premier cards in general, it is a legitimate hobby, and it is a legitimate place to store value, to store money. And it's a fun thing that we can do. And most of us who collect because we love the history of the cards, we love the cards, we love the chase, we love the hunt, we love all of that. But we also feel a little bit more comfortable putting money into our card collection, knowing that it is a relatively stable place to store money. And so if you're going on a vacation, and when you come home from the vacation, all you have is the memory, right? You have the memory, which is great. Memories are fantastic. And it's one of the reasons that I think Strongsville and the National are very worthy of the funds needed to make those trips. But I think that a lot of people have been like, you go to a dinner party, you go to a work event, and you say, yeah, I'm really into sports cards. I think a lot of the times, I don't know about you all, but the looks I get back sometimes are like, oh, like that's cool. I collected cards when I was a kid. And it wasn't something that a lot of people outside of the hobby viewed as legitimate. And I think that it is. It always has been. It always has been, and I think all of us in the hobby know that. But when there's PR like this, like when you have a big mantle card sell and it hits ESPN, or this card and it hits ESPN, and it starts to come across like the mainstream feeds, the mainstream market becomes something that acknowledges the big sale and what is actually happening. What that does, I believe, what that does is it legitimizes something that we've known was legitimate to outside of the hobby. So I think that makes it a good thing. Now, when the thing that you kind of mentioned in there that would be a negative is, well, are all of these rich tech people who are going to be big time investors going to come in and buy up all of the cards, and then us collectors won't be able to participate because the price of the cards are going to go up way too much? I don't think that Kevin O'Leary and other rich, wealthy billionaires, millionaires, multimillionaires are going to come in and start buying up the, 58 Topps Hank Aaron cards. I don't think that that's what they're going to do. They might go after the PSA 9 Hank Aaron cards. They might go after the PSA 1058 Hank Aaron cards. But that's not the pool that most of us swim. Most of us swim in a normal person pool. Most of us are at the local community center, and occasionally a few of us jump off the high dive. But for the most part, we're just kind of jumping in, swimming around, we get out, right? We're not going to the Olympic state-of-the-art pool and trying to race against Michael Phelps. That's not what we're trying to do. So I think Michael Phelps, he swims in one pool, and 99.99% of us swim in a different pool. So I don't think new people who have extreme amounts of money jumping into the high-end market is really going to affect most of us. I just don't. But what it would do, if a lot of wealthy investors start to say, hey, 5-10% of our portfolio is no longer just gold and silver, but it's gold and silver and high-end art, like has been something for a while, and high-end sports cards for a while. I think that helps, actually, to be honest, I think that solidifies the hobby. Because a lot of people who have been nervous about putting money into cards, about saying, yeah, I'm only going to spend extra money, like myself. I'm only going to spend extra money on cards. If enough people start to say, that's actually a fairly reasonable, realistic, legitimate place to store some of my assets, I think what that does is it adds money to the hobby and it adds people to the hobby. And what that does is it makes it where it's a deeper foundation for the hobby itself. Now, I know you're sitting there going, wait a second, Greg, you're starting to contradict yourself. You just said that it's not going to affect most of us with the prices. The thing that's going to be affected the most is going to be the high-end stuff, in my opinion. It's going to be the pre-war, golden era, 8s, 9s, 10s. It's going to be the high-end mantles. It's going to be the high-end Ruths. It's going to be the high-end Cobbs. It's going to be that kind of stuff that is going to see the biggest amount of new demand, which doesn't affect a ton of us. There is a little bit of a trickle down. But most of us who want to get a Cobb are looking for an authentic or a 1.5 or a 2 or a 1 or something in that low end range. I don't think that new people investing in high end T206 Ty Cobbs is going to greatly affect the PSA 1 Ty Cobb. But what it will do is when you have more people having some money in the hobby, I think it strengthens the foundation of the hobby, because the hobby is really demand driven. If the demand goes away for whatever reason, then the bottom falls out of the market because the supply is fixed. So the demand is going to have the greatest impact up or down on the hobby. And so if we have more people who are willing to be a participant in the hobby as a result of this news, I think it provides a stronger foundation for the hobby. I don't think that it makes the average guy type cards, like what I collect, go crazy, but it does have more people making sure that the hobby is healthy because a lot more people have some money in the hobby. Will prices go up? They would go up some. Even the low end stuff, the trickle down effect would have some increase, but we kind of it's worth it. The trade-off of the price going up a little, but having more people kind of care about the hobby and more people invested in the hobby and more people participating in the hobby, I think it's worth the jump that happened. I think it's similar to the COVID. If you look pre-COVID, similar to the COVID effect. If you look at the market pre-COVID and you look at the market post-COVID, there was a spike and there was a drop, but the drop never went below the pre-COVID amount. And the reason for that is because more people entered the market, which provided stability for the hobby. So if some high-end people come in, I think there will be some of a climb, and then there might be a little bit of a correction. And I think that where it settles would be higher than where it is now. But I think that the market is healthier now than it was pre-COVID because there's more people involved and there are more nets to help catch a market that starts to struggle because there's more people interested and willing to participate. So would prices go up? Some. It would mostly go up for the ultra high-end stuff. It would go up a little bit for us normal people cards. But I think the trade-off is good because I think it would provide additional stability by having more participants in the hobby. That's my take, but I want to hear your take, especially in the comments to Monday's video, which I'll put in the comments below. I'll put a link, or in the description below, I'll put a link, but you know where to find those. I want to hear your thoughts on this because, hey, maybe I'm crazy. It's very, very possible that I'm crazy. This next question came in over the last week via email, and it says, I am 78 years old and beyond midlife. My primary vintage focus covers the 56 to 60 top set, many of which are cards I bought and played with as a kid. I am reaching out for your opinions, suggestions, and advice with 3 graded cards, scans attached. I have in my 1956 Topps graded baseball cassette. The cards in question are the number 31 Hank Aaron, grayback, number 110 Yogi Berra, grayback, and number 135 Mickey Mantle, grayback. Here are some of the details. In my first set, I have 3 cards graded by GAI. They were one of the early players in the sports card grading game, but are virtually irrelevant today. The cards I have were from the very early days of GAI. I believe they were fairly reputable at the time, and these cards were graded. I think the card grades might be slightly overgraded, but are mostly accurate. I would like to get these cards out of their GAI holders and into SGC or PSA holders. I have spent hours looking at these cards, and I have found absolutely no issues which might result in a qualified or authentic grade. I do not see any creases, stains, corner folds, etc., front or back. The surfaces are very clean, as are the edges. Centering is probably the biggest issue. The cards measure exactly what a 1956 Topps card should measure, 2 5/8 by 3 3/4. While I strive for value in my vintage cards, I will not be selling these cards. They are 100% for my collection and to pass on when I am gone. I would like to get them in holders of a reputable grading company like SGC or PSA and am reaching out for your advice and opinions. What would you do if these were your cards in your collection? Would you break them out or leave them in their GAI holders? Would you submit to SGC or PSA? Would you grade them? Do you see any significant risk in submitting an SGC PSA? I am interested how you would address this situation. I respect your opinion, your common sense, and your approach to collecting vintage. I have attached scans of the 3 cards in question, thinking they might help in making evaluations and decisions. Also, you have my go-ahead if you would like to share this with your vintage collector friends, or if you want to use it as part of one of your Q&A videos. I really enjoy your videos. I live in Iowa and have very few quality sports card shows I am able to attend. YouTube gives me a chance to really enjoy the hobby, even though it's through others. All right, I definitely have an opinion on this. Now, first off, your situation is very similar to my dad's situation. You're 78, my dad is 75. You collected in the late 50s to 1960-ish. My dad collected 58, 59, and 60, and a little bit into 61 especially. Very similar situations. So whenever I give advice, whenever somebody asks me my opinion, my students do this all the time. They say, Mr. Miller, what should I do next year for college? Should I go to the private school, the public school, the local community college? What should I do? My response whenever I give anybody advice is, what advice would I use? What advice would I give to someone I care about? So what I say to them is, well, my daughter Molly did this, and I recommended she do this. My daughter Lucy is doing this. I recommended Lucy does this. So what advice would I give my dad if my dad were to ask me this exact question? That's really the situation. So this is what I would tell my dad if my dad was asking. Now, my dad asks my advice some. I ask my dad for advice, I think more than he asks me for advice. But as a result of us asking each other for advice a lot, I think we're mostly on the same page with a lot of things whenever we're talking about situations and advice. There are times we disagree, not super often. So here is what I would say to you on this. Why do we have a will? What? What are you talking about, Greg? A couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, I spent like $1,000 or $2,000 setting up my trust with my wife. Now, why would I spend $1,000 or $2,000 on a trust? When I'm dead, it's not going to affect me. So who cares what happens to my money and my assets when I'm gone? It doesn't matter. Who cares? That could be someone else's problem. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. The people I'm going to be leaving my assets to when I die, because guess what? I will. I want to not make their life a massive headache. I want to be taking care of my family members after I'm dead, as well as when I'm alive. That's what you do for people you care about. When you care about somebody, you want to help them. And you don't want to say, well, I'm dead now, so I don't care about them anymore. That's not the way I live. The way I live is I want to take care of people now. I want to take care of people for the rest of my life. And the people that I care about, I also want to take care of after I'm gone. So because of that, if you leave your cards ungraded, okay? If you leave your cards ungraded, that might be the way that you prefer to have them. Absolutely. Maybe that is your preference. But you're not really taking care of the people who are going to eventually end up with those, because they're likely to take them to the local card shop, and they're likely to be taken advantage of because they don't know cards and they don't know these cards like you do. So my advice to people is, just like I set up a will, just like I set up a trust, because if you don't set up a will or a trust, you are leaving a massive, massive headache to your loved ones who are going to be receiving your assets. So just like I would say you should set up a trust or a will, I also believe that you should seriously think about getting your cards graded. Now, what you're saying is, should I get them graded, but they're already graded, but they're graded by GAI. So, GAI, if you're not familiar, Mike Baker, who was one of the lead graders at PSA, he broke off. He started his own grading company. His own grading company was called GAI, or at least he was, I don't know if he was the owner or if he was just a major participant, but he was a foundational member of GAI grading. Then what happened is there was a massive scandal that came out that a bunch of the cards that ended up in GAI holders were trimmed. Now, I wasn't there. I wasn't part of the transactions, but as a result of that, this massive amount of cards that were allegedly trimmed, and then put into holders, allegedly, are now, people go, are these trimmed cards or are they not? Because there's this storm cloud over cards in GAI holders. So, what does that mean? What that means is cards in GAI holders are ripe. They are ripe to be negotiated against that potential storm cloud. So if you leave these cards to your family members in GAI holders, I think that there's a very good chance that somebody's going to not pay full amounts for them. Now, was every card in a GAI holder trimmed? Of course not. Of course not. I'm sure there are thousands of cards in GAI holders that aren't trimmed. But because there was this scandal and some of the cards were allegedly trimmed, there is this kind of like doubt about all cards in GAI holders. So what would I do? What would I tell my dad to do if he had his cards in GAI holders? Now, what you're saying is, I want them to be graded, is what you're saying in the email. You're saying, I want them to be graded by PSA or graded by SGC. So I want to somehow get them from GAI holders into SGC or PSA holders. You also are saying that you've looked the cards over really closely. They measure out fully. You have no reason to believe that they're trimmed. You have no reason to believe that the grades are crazy. So what would I do? Here's what I would do. And I'm looking, it took me 7 minutes. I have to set the stage. See, if I just answer the question, it to me, it's not as valuable as if I give the explanation to why I have the opinion that I have. So it took me 7 minutes to do that. So what I would do, if it was me, I don't think I would try to cross them over to PSA. I definitely wouldn't try to cross them over to PSA. Because PSA, I feel that PSA looks down on all other grading companies. I think that PSA believes they're the best. Are they the best? Different argument, different question, different discussion. But I believe that PSA thinks they are the superior grading company to all other grading companies. And so if you try to cross a card from SGC to PSA, I think that PSA tends to look down on those other companies' holders. So whatever card, whatever grade the card has from that holder, there's no way it's going to get above that. And it will almost certainly get a significantly lower grade because PSA, I think, kind of looks down on the other grading companies. Now, SGC was acquired by the same parent company as PSA. We know that PSA has moved a location into SGC headquarters. So in the same building as SGC are now PSA graders. Some of those PSA graders are former SGC graders, and some of them are people who are training the SGC, former SGC graders to the PSA way. That's the quotes from the heads of PSA that they're sending people down there to teach them the PSA way. So, my question is, are the people at SGC still using the SGC way, or is it starting to, or could it potentially become the PSA way? Now, if you're a PSA person, you think that's good because PSA is going to help make SGC better. If you're an SGC person, that's bad because you think PSA potentially is evil or whatever it is that you think. Long story short, what I would do, if it was me, is I would crack the cards. I would crack the cards. I did an episode way back on how I crack cards. Doesn't mean it's right. There's a lot of ways to crack cards. I would crack the cards out of GAI holders, and I would submit them to SGC. I believe SGC is the most consistent grader, especially when it comes to vintage cards. I believe that SGC grades vintage cards the best. I believe that SGC grades vintage cards the most consistent. Now, is that going to change as PSA is now working with and there's a lot of crossover between the SGC and PSA people? Is it possible that SGC starts to change and be more like PSA? I think that's possible. Now, is that a bad thing? Whole different argument. If it was me, I would crack the cards out of the GAI holders. I would then submit them raw to SGC for grading. That's what I would do. I think submitting them in GAI holders, there's too many storm clouds around GAI stuff. Not that there necessarily should be with every card, but I just think that that's what happens. And when there's a controversy, and again, we got to take a step back and say, this is the whole reason why any grading company has the potential to go from the dominant leader, not that GAI was, but to be a massive player in the hobby, to being not a massive player if a controversy were to come out. So nobody is immune from falling from their perch. Everybody is prone to a potential controversy and a potential change in public opinion about who the best grading company is. And I know that people say, not PSA. I actually think yes, PSA. Because it's happened. Beckett was on the top spot. GAI was really high up there for a long time. I just think that if it was me, and that's the question, what advice would I give? I'd crack them. I'd send them raw to SGC, and whatever grades they came back with, I'd accept. I would actually do it sooner rather than later because I think that there's enough turnover right now with SGC graders leaving and going over to PSA that it's not impossible that the SGC grading standards and consistency could potentially change as a lot. And again, I've not heard any on the record comments about numbers, but I've heard that a huge number of SGC graders have taken the offer to become PSA graders. And it concerns me about who will be grading for SGC in the near future. So if it's me, I'd crack them, I'd send them raw to SGC, and I'd do it sooner rather than later. This one says, love your channel. Here's my question. Do we need a 100-point grading scale? Is the 10-point grading scale just too narrow? We definitely don't need a 1,000-point scale like TAG. And maybe I'm the only one that doesn't think PSA grading standards haven't changed. We're all just seeing the slight differences within the same card. Some, insert number grade here, look better than others, new or old slabs. Thanks for all you do for the hobby. All right, good questions. More grading talk, which I know some of you love and some of you hate and some of you are indifferent to. I think that, well, let me take a step back. I'm a teacher, okay? And let's say your child was in my class and your child received a B+ in my class. And let's say that their brother or sister was also in my class and that child received a B-. Would you think, in your opinion, did those two students perform similarly? Did they perform dramatically different? Or was it somewhere in between? I think that the difference between an 80% in my class and an 89% in my class means the person with the 89% was significantly better. But if they both got a B, if there was no B+, if there was no B-, but the person with the 89% got a B, and the person with an 80% got a B, that doesn't really tell the whole story, does it? The point of grading, my understanding, well, there are a lot of, there are a few points of grading. One thing is to authenticate. One thing is to differentiate. One thing is to provide information about qualities about the card that you may or may not have in hand and only see a picture of. But one of the things is to differentiate this card versus this card. And if the 80% and the 89% get the same grade, there's no differentiation, even though they might be dramatically different. So for a long, long time, remember, for years, PSA didn't have half grades. And now PSA does have half grades, but they rarely give them. Rarely does PSA give a half grade. Now, SGC gives a lot of half grades. If I submitted 20 cards to SGC, I would say at least 10 of them would get a half grade, and the other 10 would get a whole grade. If I submitted 20 cards to PSA, maybe one card would get a half grade? So I believe half grades are a happy medium for what you're asking, but PSA just doesn't really use them. And they don't have a 9.5. It's either a 9 or a 10. They don't have the 9.5. And so I think a 100-point scale would be ideal. I think that the half-point scale that they have is, I think the half-point scale is a good compromise, but I don't feel like PSA actually utilizes it like they should. And I feel that the other grading companies are better at utilizing it. So the difference between an 81% and an 84%, right, a B or a B minus, it does tell a little bit of a story, and that's what an 8 versus an 8.5 does. An 8.5 versus a 9. So I think the half-point scale is good enough, but I don't think that PSA actually really likes to use the half-point grades for whatever reason. No idea why. And if you're like, Greg, you're insane. I get half grades all the time. Then tell me that down below. But I just think that half grades, I mean, if you look at the population report and you look at how many 8s, how many 9s, and how many 8.5s, the number of 8.5s is absolutely minuscule compared to the 8s and 9s. And in theory, shouldn't there be an even distribution of 8s, 8.5s, and 9s? So I don't know if we need a 100-point scale. I would be on board with a 100-point scale. I would be on board with a half-point scale, which is actually used. But I do think that there's a huge difference. In theory, there's a huge difference between a B minus and an A minus, a B plus and a B minus. And right now, there's not a lot of utilization of the differentiation between the grades. So either PSA really needs to start utilizing their half grades more, or I would be in favor of a half point or a 100-point scale. But in reality, at this point, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen. Why didn't they do a 100-point scale from the beginning? Why didn't they? Because remember, SGC started with that 100-point scale. And PSA was always just the 1 through 10. And then they went to the half grades, but no 9.5s. Why wasn't it a 100-point scale from the beginning? I have an opinion. And I could start a whole new opinion about that opinion. I think if there's a 100-point scale and you send a card in and you crack it, and you send it in again and you crack it, and you send it again and you crack it, and you send it in again and crack it, it'll never get the same grade. So I think one of the reasons that they like going with 8 versus 9, 7 versus 8, is I think it's much more likely that they would actually give you the same grade that it got last time, even though we all know that's not 100% the case. It's more likely that they would get the same grade. But if it was a 100-point scale, and one time you got an 82, and the next time an 85, the next time a 91, the next time a 78, and the next time an 87, I think what that would do is it would make it more obvious to all of us collectors that the grading scale is very arbitrary. And so they don't want us to realize how arbitrary the scale is. And maybe this is what I'll talk about on Friday. Maybe I'll get deeper into that thought on Friday. I'll show my cards from August on Friday, and I'll get deeper into how arbitrary grades actually are and what grades on slabs actually mean. Because when you see an 8, I don't really think it means 8. I've talked about this a little bit. I have too many thoughts on this to try to fit into here. I've already gone for 7.5 minutes. I'll talk more about that on Friday. How's that?
And this one says, question, assuming we don't care about the grade number, what if there was a movement where collectors who submit a grade request authentic only for every card? Isn't that the only thing we truly care about? And the negative connotation that comes with the word authentic, isn't the definition of something being authentic a good thing? I have an SGC Authentic T205 Walter Johnson. I love not seeing a grade number above the card. It feels like the card has nothing to apologize for, and I have nothing to distract me on the slab. Thanks.
All right. I like what you're saying. I like this concept. Now, I know also, because there was a lot of back and forth in the comments below this original comment. And some people were saying, that's impossible now. And you were saying, I know, I'm just saying hypothetically. The snowball has gotten to the point now. The cat is out of the bag, and we're not going to get the cat back into the bag. It's not going to happen. But your point, I believe, is we're so focused on the grades. Wouldn't it be nice if instead of the cards getting a grade, they just got authentic versus not authentic? Because then we don't have to worry about buying a fake card, but we can let our eyes be the grader. That would be perfect. So wouldn't it be great if instead of some third party, some person at PSA looking at a card under heavy magnification and coming up with an opinion on it, an opinion which changes the value of the card dramatically, because that's the thing. When I hear people at PSA say, well, yeah, the grades can change depending on, because there's ranges and standards and opinions of the graders. And so when a card might get a 7 this time and an 8 this time and a 6 the next time, the problem with that is if the card gets a 6 versus the card gets an 8, that could result in thousands and thousands and thousands of additional dollars gained or lost by the person submitting the card. So the fact that a card could get a 6 one day, a 7 one day, and an 8 one day might be a huge change in the perceived value and the potential value that the owner of the card could get. That's the big problem with the fact that the grading standards are a little bit arbitrary. So I hear you. And I think that as collectors, most of us are mostly only interested in, is it authentic? And let me just take a step back for a second and say, I know a lot of people out there go, oh my gosh, here we go again with grading. But people are interested in grading. This is the 4th question, and it is the 3rd out of 4 that is about grading. Grading is entrenched in the hobby, and grading is a controversial topic in the hobby, and it's always going to be that way because it's an opinion. Was Mary Lou's vault really a perfect 10? Or was it only because it was in LA that she did the vault and there was a bias by the judges. Whenever there is a ball or strike call, whenever there is a safe or out call, whenever there is a pass interference or no pass interference, or did he reach the first down, or did he actually, the ball cross the goal line, there's always controversy. There's always argument and discussion, and human error is real, and judges and referees and umpires are human beings making judgment calls. This is just part of it. It's just part of it. And I understand what you're saying in the question. You're saying, I don't want it to be part of it. I just want to know, is the card real or not? And you're not saying, let's just change it. You're just saying, what if it changed? But here's the problem. When card collecting and selling went global, and it went global because of the internet. It went global in the 1990s because what used to happen is people, and I know a lot of people who did this, and they've told a lot of stories about it. What used to happen is people would get, a Sports Collector's Digest, or they'd get some sort of advertisement to buy sports cards, and they'd mail their money in and blindly get a card back that was supposed to be in a certain condition. And there wasn't really any recourse. There weren't really any pictures. You just said, I want to have that card, and I'm going to mail this in. And some people mailed in the money for the card, and then they said, we were out of that card, so we gave you this card instead. We're a long ways from that. We're a long ways from that. And when there became more legitimacy in the hobby, and people were able to make more transactions on the internet, through the mail, across the world, people wanted to have a pretty good idea of what they were actually buying. And I could take a picture of a card that is going to receive a 3. And I could take a picture of it with certain lighting and certain adjustments to the color saturation and cropping and different things to make the card look different than it actually is. And so while a lot of people like to bash grading, I don't like to bash grading. I hold the grading companies accountable when I think that the grading companies are doing things that I don't agree with. But I actually think that cards being graded allowed way more commerce to take place with cards. Because now when I buy a card from someone in Florida and the card has a 7 on it, I go, I know it doesn't have any creases. I know it doesn't have any wrinkles. I know it doesn't have any wax on it. I know that it's not miscut. I know that it's not altered. I know that it's not a fake because PSA or SGC gave it a 7. And in the grading standards for PSA and SGC, those things aren't allowed for 7s, right? And so it gives me confidence. It gives the buyer confidence that the card has certain qualities. Qualities like no creases. Qualities like no wrinkles. Qualities like it wasn't altered. That allows more commerce to happen. I believe that the overall grading of sports cards has actually allowed us to expand the hobby, have more commerce for the hobby, allow us to sell our cards at higher values. The people who are entering the hobby are able to use those standards because a lot of people say, oh, I could use my own eyes. Well, somebody who's new to the hobby doesn't know the difference between a 9 and a 6. They don't know the difference between a 3 and a 6. And there's a huge difference between a very good card and an ex-mint card and a near mint to mint card. There's a very big difference between those. And so what it does is it protects people who want to participate in the hobby but aren't experts in the hobby. I think that grading has done a lot of good for us. I do believe that. And I don't know if everybody thinks I'm crazy for saying, am I defending grading? I think grading has done more good than bad. But with everything, there is a yin to the yang. There is a counterpart point to the point. And there are some negatives as a result of grading. But as a whole, I actually think grading is a good thing. I do. And that might make me unpopular. And that's okay. That subscribe button, also, if you click it, it also will allow you to unsubscribe. So if me saying that makes you go, this isn't the guy for me, go click it. It's okay. I won't be offended. I'm okay. I promise you, I'll be okay. I think it's done more good than bad, but there are some things in grading that I think could be improved, and I'll also call those things out, like I just did in the last couple of answers. Ultimately, I think numeric grades provide information and protection for potential buyers and for potential sellers to make sure that the commerce that takes place is legitimized. That's what I think. And if all we did was authenticate cards, that would be good for a portion of collectors who don't care about the condition. That's not of importance to them. But I think that there is an overwhelming majority of collectors who want to be able to have commerce regarding cards and obtain information about the cards without being in the same room as the cards, and have a level of comfort before sending money to those people, allowing that transaction to take place. And so as a whole, I actually think numeric grades are a good thing. And that might make me crazy, or it might make me normal. Regardless, I've never attempted to necessarily be crazy or not crazy. All I've tried to ever be is authentic and myself and share my actual opinion. And that, my friends, is my actual opinion.
And finally, our last question for the week says, great Q&A, Greg. I don't worry about the whale investor collector because I don't play in that arena. I do worry about institutional money coming in and purchasing the iconic or rare cards, and then that pushes the whale collector down, and sooner or later I am competing for cards against guys with many more resources. Call it trickle-down collecting. Question: I think every collector goes through a time when they wonder if their collection is good enough or worthy at some level. Was there a time when you purchased a card or an event where you thought, yeah, I'm starting to put together a worthy collection?
All right. I think that there's a reason that one of the 7 deadly sins is envy. And the reason that I think that it's a very negative, it's a very poisonous thing, is if we're looking at what other people have and comparing it to what we have, and then making a determination on whether we are, validated or not. That is a very dangerous road to go down. And I'm not saying that you're saying that. I hear the question. Trust me, I hear the question. And I understand what you're getting at. I think Facebook is like horrible. Let me say this. I think social media, for simply social purposes, there is a lot of negative feelings and opinions and things that go down there, because it's sort of like this just giant contest of comparing what I have to what you have. You see, look at my kids on their first day of school and how the picture's taken in the perfect lighting and they're smiling and they look happy, even though 2 minutes earlier they were grumpy and throwing cereal at their brother and sister. Valentine's Day on Facebook is just like, give me a break. Look at what my favorite husband, my favorite husband. Look at what my husband did, my boyfriend did. Oh my gosh, they're so amazing. And it's it's comparing. Hey, check out the progress on my backyard. the backyard that we're spending $150,000 on, the new pool and landscaping. Look at how cool it is. You're showing off, people. You're showing off. And hey, people could do what they want. That's why I don't do the Facebook thing. I have Facebook. I have it. And I have it because there are certain people in my life. It's the only method of communication I have with them. So I have like former students, I have former classmates, I have friends I'm not in contact with. I don't have their contact information, but it's a way to be able to connect with them. But I never look at it for social purposes. I do think Facebook has positives for like marketplaces. You know, I would encourage you all to get on Facebook for card buying and selling. I think that's a great thing. But I think what the fallout of if you start to go, well, look, this friend of mine popped up, let me add them. I'd stay away from that because all it is a giant competition. And I'm not interested in that. A lot of people go golfing with their friends and they bet. They say, oh yeah, let's bet $5 a hole or $1 a skin or whatever. I golf with people that I like because I want to spend time with them. The last thing I want to do with people that I like and want to spend time with is root against them. I don't want to root against you. I don't want to see you hit one out of bounds so I could get a quarter or I could get $1 skin. That's insane. If you ever golf with me and say, hey, we play $2 a hole, I go, have fun. I'm going to be over here just playing golf, enjoying your company, rooting for you to make the birdie. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to, cackle when you miss a 2-foot putt because I just won a $2 skin. That's not my lane. That's not how I am. And there are times that with YouTube, and it's one of the reasons I don't show cards that much. One of the reasons I don't show cards that much is number one, if you want to see amazing cards that you've never seen before, you're probably better off watching some other channels. My collection is nice. It's a nice, solid collection. But there are lots of people on YouTube. Lots and lots of people on YouTube who have 10 times the collection that I have. But I am not here to show you my amazing collection. What I am here to do is share my love for this hobby and share my opinions about the hobby and share your opinions and have discussions about the hobby. I don't show a ton of cards because for me, I'm not on here as a way to show you how great my collection is. You know, I commonly have people leave comments or say things on other channels. Oh, Greg, does he even have cards? He hardly ever shows cards. That guy doesn't even have very many cards. I have a lot of cards. I think I have a nice collection. It's not as good as others, but it's pretty nice. But I'm not up here to sit here and show you all my cards because I think that I'm great. Now let me stop. I'm not suggesting that people who do show cards are doing it to make others feel bad. They're excited. They're showing their collection. I just think it can be dangerous. Just like some people show the flowers that their husband sent them at work because they want to show their husband how much they appreciate them and they're truly overjoyed by the flowers. But there are some other people who show the pictures of the flowers to try to make everybody else jealous. And that's not me. It's just not. And if you think it's me, unfortunately, you're not correct. So the whole thought of, is my collection worthy? Now, I'm not bashing the question. Let me just say that. What I am suggesting to everybody is, don't measure your collection versus any other person's collection. Keith, Lonely Basement, Baseball. Lonely Basement! Hold on. Welcome back to the Lonely Basement! Baseball cards. That guy loves cards. And a lot of his pickups are dollar box cards. I love it. I love his energy. I love his channel. And I love how pumped he'll get when he picks up a Purina Dave Winfield card. I love it. But I can't put his collection and those Purina cat food cards up against some other channels that have $10,000 cards. I love his channel because I love his way that he collects, the things he thinks about and how he collects, why he collects the way he collects, his excitement about it. I love his channel. I've mentioned his channel many times. And I will absolutely continue to shout out his channel. Keith, Lonely Basement Baseball, the Lonely Basement Baseball cards. I'll put a link down below in the description. But it's not a comparison. It's like people say, what's your handicap? People say that to me, hey, what's your handicap? I go, I mean, the last 2 times I played, I shot this and this. Do I have a handicap? I do. Do I tell you what my handicap is? Why? Why does it matter? If you, let's just go golfing together. If you want to hang out, let's golf. But I do understand the question. And your question, I hope that you're not thinking that I'm suggesting that you are saying that you have to have a certain type of card to be legitimate as a collector. I don't think that's what you're suggesting. All I'm saying is to everybody out there, it doesn't matter what you collect, how you collect, what your collection is worth, whether you collect modern, whether you collect vintage, whether you collect pre-war, whether you collect Hall of Famers, whether you collect just players from the team that you like, it doesn't matter how you collect. If you yourself are having fun with it, then you're doing a great job. Now, if we wanted to talk about investment potential, if we wanted to talk about what are the 5 players that are a better investment than other 5 players, completely different conversation. But generally speaking, what I would say is as long as you're having fun, you're winning at this hobby. If you go golfing and you shoot 125, but you have fun, that is a successful day. If you shoot 73 and you're angry and you're mad, that is a less successful day. So if you have a $2 million collection, or you have a collection that the total value is $2,000, one is not necessarily better than the other. It is simply different. Now, the values might be higher than the other, but it doesn't mean one person's right and one person's wrong. Okay? Yeah, the reason I keep doing these videos of cards under $50 is because I really want to make it clear that my opinion is it doesn't have to be expensive to be fun. And it doesn't have to be expensive to be meaningful. But to answer your question, there is a card that when I added it, I felt like it made me feel like my collection took a step forward. I've had a lot of cards over the years, and a lot of those cards I've sold and turned into other cards. I don't sell cards and then stick the money in the bank to go on a vacation. When I sell cards, it's just a form of a trade. I sell a card, and with that money, I put with some other money, and then I buy a different card. I don't sell cards and then the money leaves the hobby. I sell cards to buy different cards. So it's just a form of trading. And of all the cards that I've ever bought, the time I felt like my collection took the biggest step forward for me not against other collections. But when my collection took the biggest step forward in my own eyes, which are the only eyes that really matter about my collection, is when I bought this. My T206 Dark Cap Christy Mathewson in a 2. And it kind of looks off center based on how it's sitting in the holder right now. That makes it look a little bit more centered. It's actually really, there's kind of like a shadow on it right now that makes it look more off center than it is. It's a beautiful card. I'm actually absolutely thrilled to have this card. Card does not have a crease. And when I got this card, I'm like, man, I have a T206 Christy Mathewson, who is an original Hall of Fame inductee, one of the original guys, and I have his T206 card, and it's in a 2, and it's beautiful. When I got that card, I was like, for myself, again, if I go golfing today and I shoot 75, I'm going to be really happy with how I played. There are other people who would shoot 75 and be miserable for the rest of the day. I would be thrilled with the 75. And I would be very proud of myself. And I was very proud of the step my collection took. Not because anybody else thought it was good or anybody else thought it was legitimate, but because I, in my own eyes, felt like I took a step. I went from the little kids' playground at the elementary school to the big kid playground with the higher slide, the higher monkey bars, the higher swings. It felt like I had arrived on the big stage for me. Now, some people, this card isn't a big deal in their collection. It's a big deal in my collection, and I was pumped to get it. So, I totally understand what you're saying. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's a great question, but what I'm trying to say is don't have a measuring stick of your collection against some other person's collection. There will always be somebody with a hotter girlfriend or wife, except for me. And there will always be somebody who's better looking and wealthier and has a better collection and a better golf game and a nicer car and a bigger house. There will always be somebody better. So don't compare yourself against them to determine how you're actually doing. That is my opinion. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment, if you have a question for an upcoming episode, leave it in the comments below.